The waves crashed against the weathered pilings of Shell Cove House as I watched my family's Mercedes and BMWs disappear down the sandy road. My inheritance, this worthless piece of old Florida beachfront, creaked and swayed in the strengthening wind, almost as if it was laughing at the irony of it all. My name is Maya Rodriguez, and at 34, I'd just become the proud owner of what my family considered the biggest joke in their real estate portfolio. A ramshackle 3-bedroom beach house on a narrow strip of coastline that developers had mysteriously avoided for decades. Maya always did have more sentiment than sense, I heard my sister Isabella say as they'd left the lawyer's office earlier. She was clutching the paperwork for her shiny new Miami condo development, worth a cool $12 million. My brother Marco had done even better, snagging the family's prized Orlando hotel chain, valued at $25 million. As for me, I got the creaky old beach house where we'd spent summers as kids, before my parents discovered the allure of luxury real estate development. The land's worthless, my father had declared, his voice carrying that mixture of disappointment and dismissal I'd grown familiar with since choosing marine biology over real estate development. We had it assessed. No developer will touch it because of the protected dunes and some nonsense about historical preservation. What my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been studying those protected dunes for the past year. Not as a developer or real estate assessor, but as a scientist who specialized in coastal marine archaeology. Thunder rolled across the darkening sky as I unlocked the front door. Inside, the house smelled of salt air and old wood, exactly as it had when my grandmother lived here. Before she passed away last year, she'd made my parents promise to keep the property in the family. They'd agreed, mainly because they thought the land was worthless and the house was too old to be worth renovating. My phone buzzed, a weather alert. Hurricane Elena had strengthened to Category 3 and was heading straight for this stretch of coastline. Most people would be evacuating, but I'd been waiting for this storm. In the study, I pulled out the old maps and documents I'd been collecting. Newspaper clippings from the 1850s, shipping records, and most importantly my grandmother's journals. She'd been more than just the quiet woman who made us cinnamon rolls during summer vacations. She'd been a keeper of secrets. Secrets about why this particular piece of coastline had remained undeveloped for so long. Still here, Dr. Rodriguez? Tom Wilson's voice carried from the front porch. The local handyman had been helping me prepare the house for the storm, though he didn't know my real reasons for staying. Just securing some papers, I called back. Everything battened down? Far as it can be. He stepped inside, shaking his head at the strengthening storm. You sure you won't evacuate? That barrier dune won't hold against a Cat 3. I smiled, thinking about what lay beneath that very dune. I'm sure, Tom. I need to monitor some research equipment. He looked skeptical but nodded. Tom had known my grandmother, had helped her maintain this house for 30 years. I suspected he knew more than he let on about why she'd been so insistent on keeping developers away. Your grandmother, he said carefully, she used to watch the storms too. Said they had a way of uncovering truth. Through the window I could see the waves growing larger, eating away at the barrier dune that had protected Shell Cove House for generations. In my research lab at the university, I'd mapped what lay beneath those dunes using ground-penetrating radar. The results had confirmed what my grandmother's journals hinted at. This land wasn't worthless. It was priceless. Tom, I said, would you like to know why my grandmother really kept developers away from Shell Cove? He settled into an old armchair, a knowing look in his eyes. Been wondering when you'd figure it out. I spread the old maps across my grandmother's desk. In 1846, a Spanish galleon called the Santa Rosa disappeared off this coast. It was carrying a fortune in gold and artifacts from Havana to Spain. The wreck was never found. Thunder crashed closer as I continued. Most historians thought it went down miles from here. But they were wrong. My grandmother found evidence. Pieces of Spanish pottery in the dunes after storms, old ship timbers buried in the sand. She knew the Santa Rosa had broken up right here in Shell Cove. The developers, Tom said slowly, all those surveys they did, never went deep enough. I pulled out my research data. The wreck is buried under centuries of sand, preserved by the very dunes that made developers write off this land. And tonight's storm is going to wash those dunes away, Tom finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. My phone buzzed again, A text from Dr. Sarah Martinez at the state's Marine Archaeology Department. Teams on standby. Are you sure about this? Positive, I replied. Elena's path will hit Shell Cove directly. Maximum storm surge at midnight. Tom stood looking out at the strengthening storm. Your family doesn't know, do they? About what's really here. I thought about their laughing faces as they'd driven away, so sure they'd gotten the better end of the inheritance. They spent so much time building new things they never bothered to look at what was already here. The wind was really howling now, and the first pieces of my grandmother's carefully tended garden furniture went flying past the windows. But beneath that wind, I could hear something else. The sound of waves eating away at a sand dune that had kept its secret for over 150 years. You should go, Tom, I said, checking my emergency supplies one last time. It's going to be a long night. He paused at the door. Your grandmother would be proud, you know. She always said you were the only one who really understood the value of this place. After he left, I stood on the covered porch watching the storm strengthen. The barrier dune was already showing signs of erosion, exactly as my models had predicted. By morning, Hurricane Elena would have reshaped this coastline, revealing what lay beneath those protected dunes. My family thought they'd played a cruel joke on me, giving me a worthless piece of old Florida beachfront. Instead, they'd handed me the key to one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in maritime history. I smiled, thinking of my grandmother's last words to me. Sometimes, Mija, the greatest treasures are the ones others are too blind to see. The storm was really rolling in now. I checked my satellite phone, emergency supplies, and most importantly, the waterproof camera equipment I'd set up to document everything. In a few hours, when the storm surge peaked, Shell Cove would give up its centuries-old secret. And tomorrow, when my family saw the news, they'd learn an expensive lesson about the true meaning of value. Hurricane Elena hit Shell Cove with the fury of nature unleashed. By midnight, the barrier dune that had protected the beach house for generations was being devoured by 20-foot waves. Through my storm-rated windows, I watched history being reshaped by wind and water. Ground team in position, crackled Dr. Martinez's voice over the satellite phone. First pieces of timber visible on the eastern edge. I checked the video feeds from my waterproof cameras. The storm surge was doing exactly what my models had predicted, scouring away layers of sand that had accumulated over centuries. And there, emerging from the dune like ghosts from the past, were the first signs of the Santa Rosa. Confirming visual on Spanish colonial construction, I reported, my hands shaking as I documented everything. Classic galleon timber patterns, consistent with 1840s shipbuilding techniques. The storm raged through the night, each massive wave revealing more of the wreck. By dawn, as Elena moved inland and the winds began to die, the full scope of what we'd discovered became clear. The Santa Rosa hadn't just wrecked at Shell Cove. It had been perfectly preserved by the very sand dunes that developers had dismissed as worthless. The ship's hull, cargo holds, and most importantly its precious cargo had been protected from erosion and looters by nature itself. My phone started ringing as the first news helicopters appeared overhead. Local stations at first, then national networks. By noon, as my archaeological teams began their preliminary survey, the story had gone international. Spanish galleon discovered in Florida storm. Hurricane uncovers $40 million shipwreck. Historic treasure found at Shell Cove. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. Why, My father's voice was uncharacteristically uncertain. We're seeing something on the news. Yes, Dad. I kept my voice professional the way I did when presenting at academic conferences. Something about the worthless beach house. There must be some mistake. Our surveys. We're looking for development potential, I finished. Not historical artifacts. By the way, Dr. Martinez from the State Marine Archaeology Department would like to talk to you about all those attempts to bulldoze a protected historical site. The line went silent for a moment. In the background, I could hear Isabella and Marco arguing about legal rights to the discovery. We should meet, my father said finally. As a family. Discuss how to handle this. Actually, I replied, watching more news vans pull up to Shell Cove. I'm quite busy with the archaeological survey. But my lawyer can meet with you tomorrow to discuss the preservation easement I've just filed. Preservation easement? Yes. As the property owner, I've granted permanent protection status to Shell Cove. No development will ever be allowed here. Instead, it's going to become a marine archaeology research station and museum. I could almost hear his blood pressure rising. Maya, be reasonable. Do you know how much developers would pay for that land now? About $40 million less than what's already here, I said. But this isn't about money, Dad. It's about preserving history. Over the next few weeks, Shell Cove transformed from a quiet beach into the archaeological discovery of the decade. The Santa Rosa's cargo, gold coins, precious artifacts and priceless historical items, was carefully catalogued and preserved. Universities offered research partnerships. Museums began negotiating for exhibits. My family tried everything to gain control: legal challenges, emotional manipulation, even attempts to have me declared incompetent to manage the property. But my grandmother had been smarter than any of us knew. Her will had been ironclad, and my documentation of the site's historical significance was unassailable. You could have been rich, Isabella said when they finally gave up the legal battle. We stood on the newly reinforced seawall, watching archaeologists carefully excavate the wreck. I am rich, I replied. Just not the way you measure it. The Shell Cove Marine Archaeology Center opened 1 year later. The old beach house, restored and expanded, became our research headquarters. The barrier dune was rebuilt, this time engineered to protect both the house and the excavation site. Tom Wilson joined our maintenance staff, teaching new employees about the importance of preserving history. Your grandmother, he told me one evening, she used to say that true wealth isn't about what you can build, it's about what you choose to protect. My family, they adapted eventually. The publicity from the discovery actually helped their other properties. Isabella's Miami condos rebranded with a historical theme. Marco's hotels added maritime museums. My father even started showing up at the center's educational events, proudly introducing himself as Dr. Rodriguez's father. Last month, a young girl visited the center with her school group. As I showed them the restored artifacts from the Santa Rosa, she asked, "Why didn't anyone find the ship before?" Because, I told her, sometimes the most valuable things are protected by what others think is worthless. Those sand dunes that developers dismissed? They preserved this history for centuries, waiting for the right moment, and the right people, to discover it. The center's newest exhibition features my grandmother's journals, displayed alongside the scientific equipment that confirmed her theories. Visitors can read about the woman who spent decades protecting a secret she knew would eventually come to light. In my office, her old study, I keep a photo from that first morning after the hurricane. It shows me standing on the beach, watching the sun rise over the newly uncovered timbers of the Santa Rosa. Behind me, the old beach house stands proud, having weathered another storm. My parents had thought they were punishing me by giving me this inheritance. Instead, they'd given me exactly what I needed to make history. These days, when storms approach Shell Cove, I still watch from the porch. But now I'm not alone. Graduate students, fellow researchers and curious visitors join me, all of us learning what my grandmother always knew, that true value isn't always visible on the surface. Last week I found a new entry in the guest book written in my father's hand. I was wrong about what makes land valuable. Sometimes the greatest worth lies in what we choose to preserve, not what we choose to build. Below his words, in the margin, I added my grandmother's favorite saying, "The tides of time reveal all treasures to those patient enough to wait, and wise enough to look beneath the surface." Shell Cove House still creaks in the wind, but now it's not just a beach house. It's a gateway to history, a center of learning and proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about showing others a different way to measure worth. Every morning as I unlock the center's doors, I think about that stormy night when Elena revealed our secret. My family thought they were giving me worthless sand dunes and an old house. Instead, they gave me the key to preserving a piece of history that will outlive all their development projects. And that, as my grandmother would say, is worth more than all the luxury condos in Miami.